Welcome back to Conversations That Awaken by Joe Bandra. If you've been with us since episode 1, thank you for taking this journey with us. Over the first 10 episodes, we've questioned many of the assumptions most of us inherited without ever examining them. We've explored the nature of reality, the illusion of separation, the origins of belief, the question of God, the self-organizing universe, the fact of being, the limits of language, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. You may have noticed that we've returned to some of the same ideas more than once. That wasn't by accident. Some truths cannot be understood by hearing them only once. They must be approached from different angles, examined through different lenses, and reflected upon until they become your own direct insight. Repetition is not about convincing you, it is about inviting you to observe more deeply. Our purpose has never been to give you another belief system. It has always been to encourage you to examine, question, investigate, and ultimately understand for yourself. Because borrowed knowledge is information. Direct experience, on the other hand, is transformation. If you're joining us for the first time, we encourage you to begin with episode 1. Each conversation builds upon the previous one, forming a journey from questioning the world to questioning the one who believes they are separate from it. So wherever you are in the world, thank you for listening. Take a moment to become fully present. Set aside, just for a little while, everything you think you know. And together, let's question everything. I am Kim. I hope you had the opportunity to read or listen to Finding Neve by Joe Bandra. The name Neve, heaven spelled backward, symbolizes a journey of self-discovery, an inward return to the source of true happiness. It is an invitation to look beyond the stories we tell ourselves, rediscover our authentic nature, and awaken to the peace and wholeness that have always been within us.
Usually, when we think about ancient traditions, we picture something that's just carved in stone.
Right, like an artifact.
Yeah, exactly. You walk into a museum, you see this ancient tablet sitting behind thick glass. And, the unspoken rule of the room is incredibly clear.
You look, but you don't touch.
Right. You look, you respect it, you definitely do not touch it,
Yeah.
and you absolutely never argue with it.
Yeah, the assumption is that it belongs to a completely bygone era. I mean, our only job in the present is to observe it passively.
Maybe decipher it.
Sure, decipher it, but ultimately just leave it exactly as we found it. It's a fixed point in time.
Exactly. It's static, like a monument to the past. But then you step into the framework we are exploring today, and suddenly that thick museum glass is just completely shattered.
It really is.
We're looking at a spiritual, cultural, and historical landscape that is not a static monument at all. It is a massive, ongoing 4,000-year-old debate.
It is the absolute definition of a living conversation. I mean, it thrives entirely on questioning, challenging, and just wrestling with the most difficult realities of human existence. If you treat it like a museum piece, you just completely miss the mechanics of how it actually works.
So today, we are taking a really profound journey into some fascinating source material for this deep dive. We're looking at Joe Bandra's thought-provoking text, Conversations That Awaken.
Great text.
It really is. And specifically, we're unpacking his exploration titled Judaism, From Covenant to Awakening.
Right.
And our mission for this deep dive is not to hand you some dry historical timeline. We aren't going to just, recite a list of dates or ancient kings or archaeological digs.
Nobody wants that anyway.
Exactly. Instead, we're using Bandra's text to examine this ancient tradition from 6 entirely different angles. We're talking science, philosophy, psychology, mysticism, metaphysics, and everyday living.
So we're looking at it from the architecture of its psychology and philosophy all the way down to its highly practical daily applications.
Yeah, the goal is to understand how this tradition functions as a highly sophisticated tool. It's not just a set of beliefs you memorize.
No, not at all. It is a mechanism designed to awaken a much deeper understanding of who we are right here and now in the actual reality we inhabit.
So you might be asking, why should this matter to you? Listening right now, why do you care?
That's the big question.
Whether you grew up deeply embedded in this tradition, or whether you come from a completely different background, or, even if you consider yourself strictly secular and completely allergic to organized religion.
Right, a lot of people feel that way.
They do.
Yeah.
But this framework reveals something incredibly potent for everyone. It offers a blueprint for resilience. It's like a master class in how to wrestle with difficult truths rather than just running away from them.
And it provides this really radical method for finding the sacred in the mundane, stressful, often totally chaotic reality of your daily life.
It's about moving from a state of unconscious reactive living to a state of profound sacred responsibility.
Absolutely. And to really grasp that movement, we have to establish the foundational premise of what we are actually looking at.
Let's do it.
Judaism is far more than a religion, at least in the really narrow way modern society typically uses that word.
Right.
It is a sprawling history, an intricate culture, and a deeply ingrained moral tradition. But above all, it is a continuous, unbroken conversation that has somehow survived exile, relentless persecution, and total physical destruction.
Which is staggering when you think about it.
It is, and it survived all of that while maintaining one core, non-negotiable proclamation that every single human being carries immeasurable inherent dignity.
So let's start building this from the ground up. Before we can analyze the psychology or the mysticism of this tradition, we have to understand the foundation it was built on.
We have to go back.
Right. We have to go back roughly 4 millennia to a landscape that looked entirely different from ours. We begin with the origins.
Yeah, the narrative foundation really starts with a figure named Abraham. And it's crucial to understand the environment Abraham was operating in at that time.
Right. He was living in the ancient Near East about 4,000 years ago.
Exactly.
And the story goes that Abraham hears this divine call to just pack up everything, leave his homeland, leave everything familiar, and just start a completely new journey into the total unknown.
And this is exactly where the concept of a covenant is established.
Let's talk about that, because that word is huge here.
It is. That word covenant, it's the linchpin of the entire framework. Because we tend to conflate a covenant with a contract, and they are entirely different mechanisms.
How so?
Well, a contract is transactional. It's limited liability. I mean, I give you goods, you give me money. If you breach it, the contract is void, and we just walk away.
Right, it's a business deal.
Exactly. But a covenant is not transactional. It is a sacred, binding relationship. It is based on mutual responsibility, faithfulness, and a shared promise for the future. It's much more akin to a marriage than a business deal.
But what just completely blows my mind here is the radical shift in consciousness that Abraham represents.
Oh, yeah.
Because the significance wasn't just that one guy in the desert decided to believe in God. Up until that point, human consciousness was dominated by a world filled with competing, localized tribal gods.
That's a huge point. You had the god of the river, the god of the rain, the god of the harvest,
Right.
and of course the god of the neighboring tribe who is actively trying to conquer you.
Which sounds completely terrifying.
It was. Psychologically and philosophically, that creates a deeply fragmented view of reality.
If you have competing gods, you inherently live in a chaotic, unpredictable universe. I mean, you are constantly trying to juggle these different forces. You're appeasing one god while just hoping you don't accidentally anger another one.
Right. It's a universe of pure anxiety.
And what Abraham's narrative introduces is this monumental departure from that chaos. It is the movement toward recognizing one ultimate unifying divine reality.
It's essentially the birth of a unified theory of meaning.
A unified theory of meaning. I love that phrasing.
Yeah, because instead of being battered around by random competing forces, the universe is suddenly understood as having a singular source, which implies that existence itself has a coherent purpose and a moral direction.
And that unified theory gets put to the ultimate stress test a few generations later with Moses.
The big stress test.
Yeah. We have the defining narrative of the Israelites enslaved in Egypt. Moses leads them out toward freedom in the Exodus.
Right.
And then at Mount Sinai, the tradition states he receives the Torah, including the 10 Commandments, which basically become the absolute moral bedrock of this civilization.
And this is where we really have to address the tension between historical uncertainty and spiritual truth.
This is a big sticking point for people.
It is, because modern historians and archaeologists deeply debate the literal accuracy of the Exodus narrative.
Right, like did it happen exactly the way it's written?
Exactly. We don't have ancient Egyptian administrative records detailing the plagues or, a massive slave revolt exactly as it's written in the biblical text. Right. These narratives were developed, preserved, and refined through generations of oral tradition and cultural memory long before they were ever codified into a written document.
And this is exactly where a lot of modern, highly secular thinkers just hit a brick wall.
They do.
They throw their hands up and say, look, If you can't prove it in a lab, if we can't dig up the chariot wheels at the bottom of the Red Sea with carbon dating to back it up, then the story is fundamentally useless.
But, and this is what Bandra argues so well, treating these texts as if they are meant to be literal, modern historical textbooks is a massive category error.
A category error.
Yes. The underlying argument here is that a profound lack of historical certainty does not render a story meaningless. In fact, focusing purely on the archaeology completely misses the spiritual technology of the text.
Spiritual technology. I really like that phrase. How does that apply to the Exodus specifically?
Well, think about what the Exodus actually represents. It didn't just stay a historical claim about one specific group of people escaping a specific pharaoh.
Right.
It evolved into the ultimate universal archetype of human liberation. It is the definitive map for moving from bondage to freedom.
So it's not just about what happened 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
It's about what is happening right now inside you.
Exactly. The movement from fear to courage.
In the framework we are discussing today, it is a movement from unconsciousness to awakening.
Yes.
The idea is that everyone, at some point in their life, is trapped in their own Egypt, which, fascinatingly, translates from Hebrew as a place of narrowness or restriction.
That's such a key translation.
Everyone has their own narrow place,
Yeah.
their own bondage, and everyone requires an exodus.
And the psychological utility of that narrative is staggering. That utility is exactly what is preserved, debated, and expanded upon in the sacred texts.
You have the Torah, which is the first 5 books,
Right.
and then the larger Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, which includes the prophets and the writings. But where this tradition completely diverges from almost every other ancient system is what it does next, primarily through the Talmud.
Oh, the Talmud is fascinating.
Let's talk about the Talmud, because this completely short-circuits the usual assumptions people have about religion.
It really does.
The Talmud records centuries of intense discussions and debates among rabbis about literally everything you can imagine. Civil law, ethics, relationships, business practices, the nature of suffering, the mundane details of daily life.
Everything.
But the most staggering detail is that it doesn't just demand one unquestionable interpretation. The Talmud actively preserves the conflicting opinions.
Yes. It goes out of its way to record the disagreements. It does not edit out the losing argument.
When I first grasped this, it reminded me of how the U.S. Supreme Court operates.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison.
Right. Because when they issue a major ruling, they intentionally publish the dissenting opinions right alongside the majority opinion.
Right, they do.
They don't just say, here's the one true law, ignore everyone who disagreed. They preserve the dissent because there is a profound recognition that the minority argument today might hold a crucial piece of wisdom that a future generation is going to desperately need.
Because circumstances change.
Exactly. The argument itself has intrinsic value.
That analogy fits perfectly. And what this reveals is something deeply counterintuitive. Disagreement does not destroy faith in this system. Disagreement is the engine of it.
Wow.
Questioning, challenging, and analyzing become the highest forms of devotion. The operational command isn't blindly obey. The command is study, wrestle, question, remember, and act.
Wait, let me push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
Because comparing it to a Supreme Court dissent makes total sense legally, but spiritually. I mean, religion is almost universally stereotyped as demanding absolute, unblinking submission.
Right. The text says it, I believe it, that settles it.
Exactly. So if this tradition explicitly commands you to wrestle and question, does that mean spiritual maturity actually requires you to argue with the divine? That sounds like heresy in almost any other context.
It might sound like heresy elsewhere, but here it is the absolute core requirement. Let's look at the etymology. The very name Israel is traditionally translated as one who wrestles with God. Yeah, it originates from the story of Jacob physically wrestling with a mysterious divine being all night until dawn and refusing to let go until he gets a blessing.
Right.
If your relationship with ultimate reality is just this passive, unthinking acceptance, you are not fully engaged. Spiritual maturity in this framework demands an honest, active, sometimes painful struggle with life's most difficult questions.
So you aren't supposed to just accept things blindly.
Not at all. You are expected, even commanded, to bring your full, unfiltered intellect, your lingering doubts, and your moral outrage right to the table.
That is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
You don't leave your critical thinking at the door. You use it to batter down the door.
Exactly.
And it turns out that tradition of wrestling and adapting wasn't just some fun intellectual exercise for scholars sitting comfortably in a library somewhere.
No, it wasn't.
It became an absolute life-or-death survival mechanism when the physical centers of their world were utterly annihilated.
Which brings us to the first monumental pivot point in this history, the fall of the temples.
Yeah, this is huge.
To understand the gravity of this, you have to realize that for ancient Judaism, the entire system of worship, atonement, and connection with the divine was heavily centralized around the physical temple in Jerusalem.
It was the geographic, political, and spiritual axis of their entire universe.
And then the unthinkable happens, not just once, but twice.
Right.
First, the Babylonians destroy the first temple in 586 BCE, sending the population into exile. They eventually return and rebuild it. But then, the Roman Empire completely destroys the second temple in 70 CE.
I want you, the listener, to try to just imagine the sheer existential terror of that moment.
It's hard to even fathom.
Your entire system of meaning, the literal house of your God, the place where heaven and earth are supposed to meet, has just been burned to the ground.
The priesthood is decimated. The rituals are impossible to perform.
How does a religion survive that?
Well, historically speaking, it usually doesn't. When the central shrines of most ancient Near Eastern religions were destroyed, those religions simply disappeared. The gods of the conquered were assimilated or just completely forgotten.
But this tradition survived.
It did. The destruction of the Second Temple forced an unprecedented adaptation. Because they had already cultivated this culture of study, debate, and wrestling, Rabbinic Judaism was able to emerge from the ashes. The entire paradigm of worship fundamentally shifted.
How exactly did it shift? Because you can't just flip a switch and say, okay, no more temple, let's just do something else.
It was a massive, agonizing transition, but the rabbis essentially democratized the sacred. Without a centralized altar for animal sacrifices, worship moved into local synagogues through prayer.
Okay.
The study of texts became the equivalent of bringing an offering, and most profoundly, the sacred center of life moved into the family home.
Wow.
The dining room table effectively replaced the temple altar. Ethical conduct and community care became the new rituals of devotion.
It makes me think of a hermit crab.
A hermit crab!
Yeah, think about it. When a hermit crab outgrows its shell, or, a predator crushes its shell, the crab itself doesn't just die.
Right.
It is incredibly vulnerable, yes. It has this terrifying moment of exposure to the elements, but it scuttles across the sand, finds a new shell, adapts to the new shape, and just continues living.
That's a great image.
When that grand stone temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, the core consciousness of the faith didn't die. It just scuttled into a new shell. It found a new home in the local community and in the mind of the individual.
That resilience is exactly what we need to examine next. When outer structures collapse, the sacred is rediscovered within relationships, within collective memory, and within ordinary life.
And this brings us to a really crucial analytical lens from Bandra's text, psychology.
Yes.
Because you cannot talk about this historical resilience without acknowledging the profound, staggering collective trauma that this history carried.
No, you really can't. And we have to approach this part with the utmost humility.
Absolutely. This is a history defined by thousands of years of exile, forced displacement, inquisitions, pogroms, relentless systemic anti-Semitism.
And of course, culminating in the horrors of the Holocaust.
Yeah. The systematic, industrialized murder of 6 million Jewish people. That is a weight of suffering that simply cannot be reduced to some neat, abstract theology.
It completely defies explanation, but the psychological question that this framework forces us to examine is, how does a community survive that?
How do you keep going?
Exactly. How do human beings continue to remember, rebuild, create art, study texts, laugh, and care for one another after experiencing such incomprehensible darkness? What prevents a culture from simply collapsing into absolute, permanent nihilism?
The text suggests it comes down to the precise psychological role of memory.
Yes. Remembrance serves a deeply vital, protective purpose.
It protects identity. It ensures that the victims are not erased from the historical record, and it serves as a relentless warning to prevent those horrors from being repeated.
But there is a very fine, incredibly dangerous line here. The framework notes that while memory is essential, healing does not mean living permanently inside the wound.
That's a powerful statement.
If memory only produces despair, If the trauma becomes the sole defining characteristic of the identity, then memory just becomes an endless psychological prison.
Right.
The goal of this spiritual technology is to allow memory to be transmuted into wisdom.
Transmuted into wisdom. I
Right.
mean, what does that actually look like in practice? Because that sounds great on paper, but trauma physically changes the brain. How does an ancient tradition address the mechanics of actual healing?
It addresses it through one of its most powerful psychological concepts, teshuva.
Okay, let's unpack teshuva,
It.
because this is usually translated in English as repentance.
Right.
And I'll be honest, for a lot of people, the word repentance carries an enormous amount of heavy, guilt-ridden, toxic baggage.
Oh, absolutely.
It conjures up images of groveling, self-loathing, and begging for mercy from this angry, judgmental deity.
Which is a complete mistranslation of the original concept. The root of the word teshuva literally means return.
Return to what?
A return to integrity. A return to your true self.
Huh.
Psychologically, it is the process of recognizing that you have caused harm, taking real, unvarnished responsibility for it, making concrete amends to the person you hurt, and then, and this is crucial, resolving to choose differently the next time you're in the same situation.
So it's not about self-hatred.
No, it is not about wallowing in self-condemnation. It is a return to moral wholeness.
Hold on, I want to really dig into this, because this concept of teshuva as a return to wholeness feels like it sits in direct hostile opposition to how modern society operates right now.
Oh, it completely does.
We live in the era of internet shaming and cancel culture.
Hmm.
And the underlying psychology of our current cultural moment seems to be the permanent assignment of guilt.
Right, one mistake and you're done.
Exactly. You made a terrible mistake, or you held a bad opinion 10 years ago, and therefore you are your mistake forever. You are permanently tainted.
Mm-hmm.
How does teshuva disrupt that modern impulse?
This is a brilliant contrast to draw because it exposes the psychological architecture of our modern culture. Cancel culture basically operates on what psychologists call a fixed mindset.
Okay.
It assumes the self is completely static. It says your worst action is the totality of your identity. Teshuva, on the other hand, operates on a growth mindset, grounded in a profound, radical psychological grace.
Meaning it separates the action from the core identity of the person.
Exactly. If you are permanently canceled by society, or even worse, if you permanently condemn yourself and decide you are unredeemable, there is no pathway back. You are just exiled.
Right.
But teshuva insists that while accountability is absolutely mandatory, I mean, you cannot skip the part where you repair the damage, the core of who you are is inherently capable of returning to a state of wholeness. It demands that you change, but it promises that change is actually possible. You are not eternally defined by your worst moment.
You are not eternally defined by your worst moment.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, for anyone listening right now who is carrying around the weight of a past failure, that is an incredibly liberating concept.
It really is.
It's a mechanism for psychological survival.
Yeah.
So we've seen how this tradition survived physical destruction through adaptation, and how it survives psychological trauma through concepts like teshuva.
Yes.
Now we need to pivot and look at how this ancient worldview interacts with the modern intellect. How does it deal with empirical facts and moral philosophy?
This brings us to the intersection of science and philosophy. Let's tackle science first, because that's usually where the friction is.
Oh, yeah.
Science asks a very specific set of questions. What can be observed? What can be tested? What can be supported by empirical evidence and mathematical models?
Right. Science investigates the age of the universe, the mechanisms of evolution, the firing of neurons in the brain.
Exactly. And the immediate tension is that some traditional literal readings of ancient biblical accounts do not align with modern scientific reality.
Right. We know the universe was not created in 6 24-hour days a few thousand years ago. We know the Earth developed over billions of years. We know human beings emerged through a long process of evolution.
You have the data for that.
We do. And for a lot of people in the modern world, that's just the end of the conversation. The logic goes, the ancient text got the biology and the physics wrong, therefore the entire spiritual system is debunked. Science wins, religion loses, let's all go home.
But that conclusion rests on a massive logical fallacy.
Really? How so?
It assumes that religion and science are trying to do the exact same job. The argument presented in our source material is that science explains the mechanisms of reality. It tells us how the universe works.
Right.
Spiritual traditions, however, are exploring meaning, value, and why human beings should live in a particular way within that universe.
So it's an issue of using the wrong tool for the job. You wouldn't use a thermometer to measure how much you love your kids.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. The conflict only happens when, as the text beautifully phrases it, poetry is treated as physics.
Poetry treated as physics.
Yeah. If you expect science to answer every existential question about human meaning, purpose, and morality, you will be deeply disappointed. Science can tell you exactly how to split the atom. It cannot tell you whether it is moral to drop the bomb.
Right.
Conversely, if you read an ancient sacred text as if it were a modern, peer-reviewed biology paper, you are completely misunderstanding the genre of literature you are holding.
The source gives a perfect example of this regarding the opening lines of Genesis, the famous phrase, "Let there be light."
Yes.
It argues that this isn't a literal primitive physics equation about photons. It is a spiritual meditation on order emerging from chaos. It's about the birth of awareness, the beginning of distinction. It's a metaphor for human consciousness waking up.
And that is a profound, vital truth that remains completely true regardless of the astrophysical mechanics of the Big Bang.
Wow.
You don't have to sacrifice your scientific literacy to engage with the spiritual depth of the text.
Okay, so that resolves the tension with science. But what about philosophy?
Philosophy.
Because philosophy asks, what is true, what is good, how should we behave? And here, the framework emphasizes that this tradition places a radically high importance on ethical responsibility in the physical world.
Yes, it really does. It is not just about performing rituals correctly to appease a deity.
Right.
The Hebrew prophets were essentially the world's first radical social critics. They were constantly challenging religious hypocrisy.
They didn't hold back.
Not at all. They delivered blistering warnings to the people, stating that religious rituals are not just empty, but actually offensive to God if the society tolerates oppression.
I love reading the prophets because they are so fiercely uncompromising. You read Isaiah, and he is essentially screaming at the establishment.
Pretty much.
He's saying, you can fast all you want, you can pray all day long, you can observe every holiday perfectly, but if you are cheating your workers, if you are ignoring the homeless, if you are mistreating the immigrant and the stranger, your religion is garbage.
Exactly. Spirituality without ethical conduct is just a performance. It's a theater of piety designed to mask cruelty.
That's a heavy thought.
The philosophical stance is that your relationship with the divine is directly, inextricably linked to how you treat the most vulnerable person in your society.
Ethics over empty ritual. That makes logical sense.
Mm-hmm.
But philosophy also has to deal with the messy, uncontrollable reality of human life. Which brings us to the ultimate philosophical meat grinder, the problem of suffering.
The big one.
Yeah. How does a tradition that believes in a unified, purposeful, divine reality answer the question of why horrible, random things happen to good, innocent people?
To address this, the tradition directs us to the book of Job. Job is the archetype of the righteous, innocent man. He does everything right, and yet he loses absolutely everything. His wealth is destroyed, his health fails agonizingly, and all of his children are killed in a sudden catastrophe.
It's just horrific.
And Job does not just sit there and blindly accept it. He demands an audience with the universe. He demands to know why.
He demands a philosophical explanation for his pain. And what answer does he actually get?
He gets no simple explanation whatsoever.
Nothing.
The universe speaks, but it does not give him a neat moral equation. The profound philosophical takeaway here is that true wisdom begins when we stop pretending that every tragedy has an easy, logical answer. Awakening does not necessarily explain suffering.
Wait. I have to stop you there.
Sure.
So the grand philosophical answer to the problem of suffering is basically to just accept the mystery.
Yeah.
Because, frankly, for a listener who might be going through a devastating loss right now, who is looking for some kind of coherent explanation for their tragedy, isn't that deeply, profoundly unsatisfying?
Of course it is.
How does accepting the mystery actually help someone who is drowning in pain?
It is entirely unsatisfying if what you want is an intellectual puzzle solved. But that is exactly the tension the book of Job is exposing. Look at what happens in the story. Job's friends show up.
Right.
And initially, they do the right thing. They sit with him in silence for 7 days. But then they open their mouths.
Oh, no.
And they try to give him neat, philosophical, theological explanations for his dead children. They say, Job, you must have sinned secretly, and this is your punishment. Or, Job, God has a secret grand plan, and this is just part of the tapestry.
They offer him platitudes.
Yes. And the text vehemently rejects all of their cheap answers. Because when you are in the absolute depths of real, visceral suffering, a neatly wrapped philosophical explanation isn't just unsatisfying, it is violently insulting.
Right, minimizes it.
It minimizes the reality of the pain. It's an attempt by the friends to make themselves feel better about a chaotic universe at the expense of the victim.
Wow, that completely flips it. When someone is deep in grief, giving them a theological equation explaining why it happened is actually an act of cruelty.
Exactly. The framework argues that awakening doesn't explain the suffering away. It completely changes how we meet the suffering.
How so?
We meet it with raw honesty, with compassion, with courage, and most importantly, with silent presence. The philosophical victory isn't solving the math problem of why pain exists. The victory is refusing to let the pain strip away your humanity and refusing to let it destroy your capacity to be present with others in their dark moments.
That is heavy, but it feels so much more authentic to the actual human experience of grief than any neat theological bow.
It's very grounded.
Okay, let's shift gears entirely. We've talked about the mechanics of survival, the ethics of philosophy, and the limits of science. Now, we're to dive into the deep end of the pool.
Here we go.
We're moving from the mechanics of reality to the underlying fabric of reality itself. Let's explore the mystical and metaphysical dimensions.
This is where we examine mysticism, specifically looking at the Jewish mystical tradition known as Kabbalah.
Right.
If philosophy is about thinking clearly about God and ethics, mysticism asks a much more intimate, radical question. Can the divine reality be directly, experientially encountered? Not just theorized about, but felt.
And Kabbalah builds its entire system starting with this mind-bending concept of Ein Sof.
Yes.
The text translates Ein Sof as the endless or the infinite. It describes a divine reality that is so absolute, so unbounded, that it is totally beyond every image, concept, name, and description. You literally cannot put it in a box.
You can't even hold it in your mind. It is the infinite ground of all being. It is the reality before reality.
Right.
But that presents a massive problem for the mystic. If God is totally infinite, formless, and beyond all human comprehension, how do we, as tiny, finite human beings, ever interact with it?
Which is a huge question.
Kabbalah bridges this impossible gap through the concept of divine emanations called the Sephiro.
I spent a lot of time chewing on this concept of the Sephiro. The text explains that these are the channels or qualities through which the infinite expresses itself into creation qualities, like wisdom, understanding, compassion, strength, and beauty.
Right.
And the best analogy I could come up with to visualize this is a prism.
A prism. Walk us through how that maps onto the Sephiro.
Well, think about Ein Sof, the infinite, as pure, blinding white light. If you look directly into a beam of pure, concentrated white light, you can't actually see anything, right? It just blinds you.
Exactly. It's too much information for the human eye to process.
But if you place a glass prism in front of that light, it catches that blinding beam and fractures it. It breaks it down into a spectrum, a rainbow of distinct colors, red, blue, green, yellow. Suddenly, our human eyes can perceive it.
Oh, that's beautiful.
The Sephiro act exactly like that spiritual prism.
That is a phenomenal way to articulate it. We cannot comprehend the blinding totality of the infinite God, but we can experience the colors of God as they refract into our world.
Right. We can experience Cheesed, which is the emanation of unbound loving kindness and compassion.
Yes.
We can behold a moment of profound harmony and beauty, which is Tiferet. We can feel the necessity of boundaries, strength, and justice, which is Kavura. We are interacting with the infinite, but we are doing it through these digestible experiential frequencies.
And the mystical path requires balancing those frequencies. If you only have cheesed, unbound love, you might lack boundaries and enable destructive behavior.
Right.
If you only have Gevura, strict justice and boundaries, you become cruel and rigid. The goal is to synthesize them. And the ultimate aim of this mystical practice is a state called deveket, a deep cleaving, an intense, continuous closeness to the divine.
What does that actually look like?
In a state of deveket, God is no longer an abstract idea you simply believe in. The sacred becomes a living, breathing presence that you encounter everywhere. You encounter it in deep prayer, yes, but also in nature, in rigorous study, in listening to music, in sweeping the floor.
The text points to the famous story of Moses and the burning bush as a perfect symbol for this state of awareness. Moses sees a bush that is on fire, but it isn't turning to ash, it isn't being consumed.
Right.
The mystical interpretation suggests that reality itself is always burning with this sacred presence. The bush is always on fire. The world is always glowing with the infinite.
Yes.
The problem is just our distracted, cluttered minds.
Yeah.
We fail to notice it because we are too busy looking at our phones or worrying about our schedules.
Awakening through this mystical tradition is not about escaping the physical world. It's not about retreating to a monk's cell in a cave to find God.
Right.
It is about training your consciousness to see the divine within the material world, which inevitably leads us to the metaphysical claims of this tradition. Metaphysics asks the biggest question of all: what is ultimately real?
And this tradition answers that question with its most central, famous declaration, the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one.
Now, on a surface, historical level, that is a declaration of strict monotheism. There is only one God, not a pantheon of many gods.
Right.
But if we apply the metaphysical insights we just discussed, the text suggests this statement means something much more radical. It means that reality itself is grounded in absolute unity.
This is where it gets really trippy. We go through our everyday lives experiencing total separation. I am me sitting here. You are you sitting there. This object is a microphone. That object is a table.
This space is secular. That space over there is holy.
Exactly. But the text asks, what if, beneath all of those surface-level divisions, there is only one indivisible reality? The human mind constantly divides life into countless separate pieces just to survive and function.
Yes.
But pure awareness holds every single piece within one unified field of existence.
The text explicitly challenges the modern notion of the ego. It states that the separate ego, the part of you that feels entirely independent and disconnected from the rest of the universe, is largely an illusion.
Illusion.
Yes. Life is totally, fundamentally interconnected at its source. And this completely redefines how we are supposed to think about the word God. God isn't some bearded, grandfatherly being sitting on a cloud in another dimension managing the universe like a CEO.
Right.
The text defines God as the depth, source, and underlying mystery of existence itself.
But hold on. Let me process the practical implications of this.
Okay.
If metaphysics tells us that the separate ego is basically an illusion and that we are all deeply interconnected at the fundamental source of reality, does that mean every single interaction I have with another person is, on a metaphysical level, an interaction with the divine?
Yes.
Like if I'm at the coffee shop and the barista completely messes up my order and I get really frustrated, am I technically interacting with the manifestation of God?
Yes, absolutely. That is exactly what it means.
Wow.
If you follow the logic of this metaphysical framework to its ultimate conclusion, there is no such thing as an absolute other. Right. If the divine is the unifying ground of all existence, then treating another human being, any human being, with contempt, cruelty, or indifference is a fundamental failure to recognize the sacred reality that sustains both of you.
That is wild.
Every single interaction you have, no matter how mundane, becomes a high-stakes moment. You are either honoring the deep unity of existence or you are contributing to its painful fragmentation.
Which is an incredibly heavy responsibility to carry around. It is so easy to get lost in these lofty, beautiful, mystical ideas about infinite unity when you're meditating on a quiet mountaintop at sunrise.
Oh, for sure.
But what does that actually look like on a random Tuesday morning when you're exhausted, the kids are screaming, you're late for work, and you're stuck in traffic?
That's the real test.
It is. And this brings us to the final and perhaps most crucial aspect of Bandra's framework: everyday living. This is where the infinite comes crashing back down into the highly practical dirt of daily life.
This final perspective asks the ultimate so what question. All of this history, philosophy, and mysticism is completely useless if it doesn't change behavior.
Right.
Does this understanding actually make us kinder, freer, more honest, and more awake in our daily routines?
And the tradition's answer is found in the relentless drive to sanctify the ordinary. It doesn't just care about what happens inside the walls of the synagogue. It deeply cares about how you eat your food, how you conduct your business, how you rest, how you treat your employees, how you raise your children.
It covers everything.
Every single mundane action can become a sacred act if done with the right intention. And the absolute masterpiece of this concept is the Sabbath, or Shabbat.
Shabbat is a profound structural interruption of human habit. The text describes it as a mandated period where the endless, exhausting pressure to accomplish, to acquire, to build, and to control your environment is completely paused.
Just stopped completely.
Yes. For one day a week, you start manipulating the world and simply inhabit it.
I absolutely love how Bandra phrases the psychology of this. He writes, Shabbat whispers, you do not have to earn your right to exist.
That's a beautiful line.
Think about that in the context of our modern hyper-capitalist hustle culture, where your entire worth as a human being is constantly tied to your economic output and your productivity.
It's exhausting.
It is. The idea of taking 25 hours to completely unplug, to stop buying, selling, or producing, and to just exist as a worthy part of the sacredness of life, that isn't just a nice relaxation technique. It is an act of profound anti-consumerist rebellion.
It is a rebellion against the commodification of the human soul. It reminds you that you are a human being, not a human doing.
Right.
But this practical application doesn't just stop at personal rest. It extends violently outward into how we treat the society around us. The text spends a lot of time discussing tzedakah.
Right, which is almost always poorly translated into English simply as charity.
Yes, that translation misses a lot.
It does, because the word charity has this very specific voluntary connotation. It sounds like, oh, I have some extra change in my pocket, I'll toss it in the donation bucket because I'm feeling particularly generous today.
Right.
But the text clarifies that tzedakah is rooted in the Hebrew word for justice and righteousness.
Which completely changes the dynamic. Helping another person who is in need is not framed as optional generosity that makes you a good person. It is a strict moral responsibility.
It's an obligation.
Yes, it is an obligation to restore balance to an unjust world.
Yeah.
You are simply returning resources to where they rightfully belong.
And that obligation is intimately tied to the overarching concept of tikkun olam, which translates to repairing or healing the world.
Right.
And the text issues a very stern, almost threatening warning here. Action is absolutely required. Your spiritual awakening is fundamentally incomplete, maybe even entirely fake, if it does not express itself through tangible action in the physical world.
It's a very harsh metric.
So let me play devil's advocate for a second here, based on that warning. Let's imagine a listener who is deeply, passionately committed to their own personal spiritual growth.
Okay.
They meditate for 2 hours every day. They strictly observe rituals like resting on Shabbat to protect their inner peace. They read all the mystical texts, but they entirely ignore tikkun olam.
I see where you're going.
Right. They don't engage with the suffering of their neighbors. They ignore systemic injustice. They don't give to the poor. According to the framework we've laid out today, have they entirely missed the point of awakening?
According to this text, absolutely, unequivocally, yes. They have completely missed the point.
Wow.
The source material poses these piercing, unavoidable questions. What good is a profound mystical experience if we remain cruel to our spouses? What good is intense daily prayer if we happily ignore the suffering of the homeless person on our street?
Yeah, that cuts deep.
It does. A spirituality that terminates entirely in the self is not awakening. It is just a highly spiritualized ego. True awakening, as defined by this tradition, acts like a centrifuge. It forces you outward.
Outward into the community.
Yes, it demands that you engage with and repair the brokenness of the world around you. If you claim to believe in one unified, interconnected God, but you treat some classes of people as superior and others as inferior, your belief is hollow. It is a lie.
So we've journeyed through this massive landscape today. Let's try to pull all of these diverse threads together to summarize the core message. Awakening through this ancient tradition, as Bandra outlines it, is not a static destination. It is a continuous, dynamic movement.
It is the psychological and historical movement from slavery to freedom.
It is the metaphysical movement from fragmentation and isolation to profound unity.
It is the psychological movement from permanent guilt to the grace of return, of teshuvah.
It is the philosophical movement from societal indifference to demanding justice.
It is the practical movement from empty, performative ritual to a living, breathing presence.
And ultimately, it is the movement from simply believing in a distant concept of God to actually discovering the sacredness of existence itself, right here in the messiness of life.
The text makes one thing abundantly clear. This tradition does not offer one simple, comfortable answer to every mystery in the universe, but it offers something far more durable.
What's that?
It offers a deeply resilient tradition of remembrance, a mandate for relentless questioning, an uncompromising demand for ethical responsibility, and a structured pathway to encounter the infinite in the everyday.
We want to leave you with the final challenge presented in the text because it perfectly encapsulates everything we've wrestled with today. It says, remember where you came from. Question what you've been told. Care fiercely for this stranger.
Yes.
And realize that the deepest spiritual awakening isn't about finding a distant God hiding behind the clouds. It is about recognizing the sacred presence right in front of you. Andrew writes, the deeper question is, can you recognize the sacred in the person standing before you, Don't believe, don't disbelieve, investigate.
And to build on that final challenge, I want you to consider the collision of the metaphysical ideas and the practical realities we just discussed. If the metaphysics are true, if the separate, isolated ego is an illusion and reality is entirely fundamentally interconnected,
Right.
and if the practical mandate is true, that we must actively practice tikkun olam, repairing the world.
But repairing the world isn't about fixing something out there. It's not a chore you do for someone else out of pity. If we are all truly interconnected at the root, that when you reach out and help a stranger, when you feed the hungry or fight for justice, you are literally healing a fragmented piece of your own existence.
Exactly. You cannot heal the world without healing yourself, and you cannot heal yourself while ignoring the world. So here's a final provocative thought for you to mull over today as you go back to your life.
Let's hear it.
What is one small, tangible repair you can make in your immediate environment today? A kind word, an act of justice, mending a broken relationship, knowing that by doing so, you are actually repairing a piece of yourself.
It all goes right back to that museum exhibit we talked about at the very beginning of this deep dive. You aren't just standing there staring at an ancient dead artifact safely tucked behind glass.
No, you're not.
You are the living breath of this ongoing 4,000-year-old conversation. You are the one holding the hammer. And you have to decide whether to shatter that glass, step fully into the messy, painful, beautiful reality of the world, and start doing the work of repair.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might benefit from the conversation. Your support helps us continue exploring the deepest questions of life, consciousness, and reality. I am Julia Carter, and it is my honor to introduce Joe Bandra, author, philosopher, speaker, healthcare technology pioneer, and lifelong explorer of life's questions. Through his writing, Joe bridges science, philosophy, psychology, spirituality, and direct experience in a search for truth. His first book, Finding Neveah, is a transformative journey of self-discovery and the search for lasting happiness. His second book, Body, Mind, and Machine, chronicles his remarkable career and the evolution of healthcare technology. His next book, The Nature of Reality, explores consciousness, existence, and the mysteries at the heart of human experience. Joe's work invites us to look beyond what we think we know and awaken to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe we inhabit.
Life often feels like an endless list of tasks, constant noise and distractions, pulling us in every direction. We're all searching for happiness, but what if we've been looking in the wrong places all along?
This was Neveah's journey. Lost in the noise, she felt cut off from the peace and happiness she longed for, until she met Joe Bandra, an unconventional, insightful philosopher with a different perspective. Jay, as he is simply known, didn't hand her a map. He gave her something far more valuable, a compass, a way to turn inward, navigate her own thoughts, and uncover the clarity hidden beneath the chaos.
Readers around the world have been touched and inspired by Finding Neveah.
Your journey to inner peace begins now. Get your copy of Finding Neveah, available on Amazon and at findingneveah.org, or listen to the audiobook on Audible, Spotify, Apple, and other platforms.